In the year 1234, northern China fell. But the dynasty that would truly change history did not fall that day. It survived, and that survival made its destruction inevitable. On this channel, we explore moments where history did not turn on a single battle, but on long systems of pressure, discipline, and decision. Stories where collapse was slow, quiet, and already underway long before the final blow was struck. This story is not just about the Mongols conquering China. It is about why the Song dynasty, rich, advanced, and sophisticated, could not outlast a society that appeared, on the surface, far less complex. Because the real question is not how the Song fell. It is why, after centuries of preparation, adaptation, and warning, they still had no answer when the end finally arrived. For generations, Chinese states had faced enemies from the steppe. Nomadic riders, mobile armies, loose confederations. They came, they raided, they left. The Song dynasty believed it understood this pattern. Founded in 960, the Song ruled a China unlike any before it. Its cities were vast, its population enormous. Its economy ran on paper money, canals, and trade networks stretching across Asia. By many measures, the Song world was more advanced than anything the Mongols could imagine. And yet, the Song lived with a quiet anxiety. They did not control northern China. That land, fertile, strategic, and symbolic, had been lost to rival states long before the Mongols appeared. First the Khitan Liao, then the Jurchen Jin. The Song adapted by choosing survival over pride. They paid tribute, they fortified borders, they built walls, forts, and layered defenses along rivers and mountain passes. Most importantly, they restructured their state. The Song believed that internal stability was the key to endurance. They reduced the power of generals. They centralized command. They trusted bureaucracy over battlefield initiative. This was not weakness. It was a deliberate system. For over 300 years, it worked. While northern dynasties rose and fell, the Song endured in the south. They traded, they innovated, they governed. And when the Mongols first appeared on the horizon, the Song believed they were watching yet another northern problem unfold. They were wrong. The Mongols were not a raid-based society. They were not temporary invaders. They were building something unprecedented. A war system that did not rely on cities, harvests, or fixed borders. And China, divided, cautious and politically restrained, was not prepared for a war without limits. The turning point came not with the first Mongol attack on Song territory, but with the destruction of the Jin dynasty. For decades, the Mongols and the Song had shared a common enemy. The Jin ruled northern China, pressing constantly on Song borders. When Genghis Khan launched his campaigns against the Jin in the early 13th century, the Song leadership saw opportunity. They supported the Mongols indirectly. They withheld aid from the Jin. They waited. In 1234, the Jin dynasty collapsed. Northern China lay open. For the first time in centuries, the Song stood facing the north without an intermediary. What they did next would decide everything. Instead of preparing for a unified defense, the Song attempted to reclaim lost territories. They moved armies north. They occupied former Jin lands. They believed geography and logistics would slow the Mongols, just as they had slowed others. But the Mongols did not see the Song as a partner who had outlived their usefulness. They saw a system that had revealed its intentions. From this point forward, war was no longer conditional, it was inevitable. And the Mongols did not rush it, they waited. They studied Song defenses, they tested river crossings, they observed command structures. They learned that Song generals could not act without court approval, that reinforcements moved slowly, that political caution outweighed battlefield adaptability. The Mongols had found the pressure point, and they began applying it methodically. The Mongol invasions of Song China were not a single campaign, they were a grinding, decades-long process. Each advance was measured, each retreat intentional. The Song relied on rivers as walls. The Yangtze, in particular, was considered an unbreakable barrier. Its width, its currents, its fortified crossings. For generations, Chinese states had used rivers to neutralize steppe cavalry. The Mongols responded by changing how they fought. They learned naval warfare. They recruited Chinese engineers. They built fleets. They did not adapt emotionally or culturally. They adapted to. Meanwhile, the Song command structure fractured under pressure. Generals were rotated to prevent power consolidation. Decisions required layers of approval. Risk-taking was punished more often than failure. This was a system designed for stability, not survival under existential threat. As Mongol armies pressed deeper into Song territory, local commanders hesitated. Should they defend cities or abandon them? Hold the line or trade space for time? Every decision carried political consequences, and the Mongols exploited this hesitation. They bypassed strongholds instead of assaulting them. They isolated cities instead of storming them. They cut supply lines. They waited for famine. The Song military, numerically superior, rarely fought decisive battles. Instead, it dissolved into defensive fragments. By the 1250s, the war had entered a new phase. The Mongols were no longer testing Song defenses. They were dismantling them, one province at a time. The final collapse of the Song dynasty was not sudden, it was procedural. After decades of war, the Mongols, now ruled by Kublai Khan, shifted strategy. Kublai understood that conquest was not just about destruction, it was about administration. He declared a new dynasty, the Yuan. This was not symbolic, it was operational. By presenting himself as a legitimate Chinese ruler, Kublai undermined Song ideological resistance. Defections increased. Local elites negotiated survival. Commanders chose continuity over loyalty. The Mongols completed their encirclement of the Song heartland. They crossed the Yangtze. They seized key ports. They starved cities that could not be taken by force. The last Song emperor was a child. The court fled south island to island, river to river. In 1279, at the Battle of Yamen, the final Song fleet was destroyed. There was no dramatic duel, no final charge. The emperor was carried into the sea by his officials. The dynasty ended not with chaos, but with resignation, because, by then, the system had already collapsed. The Mongol conquest of China reshaped Eurasia for the first time. China was fully integrated into a transcontinental empire. Trade routes stabilized, ideas moved faster, technology spread, but the cost was immense. The Song model, civilian governance, economic complexity, bureaucratic restraint had failed under sustained external pressure. Not because it was weak, but because it was inflexible. The Mongols did not win by being more advanced. They won by refusing to be constrained. They absorbed what they needed. They discarded what they did not. And in doing so, they ended one of the most sophisticated dynasties in history. The lesson was not lost on later Chinese states. The Ming would centralize power. The Qing would militarize borders. The Song became a warning, a reminder that endurance requires more than stability. It requires adaptation under pressure. The fall of the Song dynasty was not a tragedy of incompetence. It was a tragedy of timing, structure, and belief. A civilization that mastered peace, but faced an enemy who mastered war as a system. If you want to explore more moments where history turns not on heroes, but on decisions made slowly and systems built over generations, tell us which story we should cover next. And if you found this analysis valuable, consider subscribing, because history does not repeat itself, but the pressures that shape it always return.